How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Christian, and welcome to Liberty After Dark. Today, we're going to be talking about a little bit of a relaxed, this is not going to be like a normal, I say normal, though. I've been doing so many offshoot things at this point. What is normal anymore, really, for this channel? But we're not going to get super deep, super hardcore into the philosophy today. I wanted to talk about a specific, it's not even really so much an issue, but a specific thing that you could say was maybe grinds my gears or whatever in discussions with other individuals who are making their way through the journey of philosophy. And it's a topic I wanted to talk about called the philosophy of wants. Now, there may be a more official name for the kind of phenomenon that I'm trying to describe here, but that's going to be what I call it for this video. So hopefully you guys understand. Thank you for doing so. And now we're on the same page. What is this philosophy of wants, right? Well, the easiest way to put it would be, imagine that you are trying to develop your morality, right? Which is something that I would encourage everybody who's watching this video to do. Don't take anything I say or any of the other creators that you say for face value. Work through the steps on your own. Go from point A to B to C, from first principles to the state of nature to wherever or however you see fit to try to create the strongest morality by which to live your life from, and hopefully we will come to an agreement on what those things are. But if we don't, we can work those out. But in that process, a place that I have seen a fair enough amount of people making an error that I felt like it deserved to be called out is in this philosophy of wants area. And that's where someone starts on the journey and they say, okay, well, I want X. So therefore, these are the things I need to do to get X, right? The reason that is an issue is, like, let's look at this from the example of, say, this is basically a libertarian ethos, right? There is an assumption in what we'll call vanilla libertarianism that this idea of liberty is inherently valuable and must be preserved. So we need to develop a philosophy that values it, right? This is specifically one of the reasons why I think libertarian is a very weak description of my personal views, because morally speaking, I don't think there's any sort of inherent value to liberty per se. You can go back to watch the video on Hume's Law if you want to get an idea of why I'm talking about there may not be any inherent high value to the concepts like liberty, even though I personally may value them. It doesn't seem right to me to come out the gate saying, well, this is what we need. It reminds me a lot of utilitarianism, which makes the assumption about the world that says, okay, pleasure good, pain bad, therefore what do we need to make that a reality? There are a couple reasons why that's an issue, but the biggest one is that you're putting yourself in an immediate selection bias. And what that means is that if you initially posit that, say, liberty or maximizing pleasure or any of these things is the desired end goal, you're automatically cutting yourself off from any number of potential answers to the questions that you may have that seem to or do directly bounce against this idea. Now, one might say, well, what's the big deal if I want to maximize pleasure, minimize pain, and, one of the answers is going to not do that? Maybe, it's just the wrong answer, right? Well, what it actually could show is that you could have a correct answer, right? So let's say gravity, for example. Maybe this isn't the perfect example, but hopefully it'll get my point across, me and my terrible analogies. Let's say we're talking about gravity, right? And we're like, should gravity exist in a world for peak utilitarianism? And it was like, well, gravity keeps us to the earth and that's pretty cool. But what about, when people fall? That's a lot of pain. How many people are hurt by gravity every single day? Maybe every single minute. How many people are hurt by gravity? We should just get rid of it, right? So you can kind of see what I'm getting at here. It gives you this ability to throw out things that are true in themselves, or in a sense that could be useful, and gives you a very limited context and window by which to view these things. So, for example, the reason that I thought this might be such a controversial topic is because I see this a lot from the typical Republican constitutionalists to libertarian to anarchist train, and it's like, okay, well, which one of these things is going to make me the most free? And there's nothing necessarily wrong about doing that if you wind up in the right place, right? But what the issue is that you won't be getting to the right place in the right way if you ever get there, right? So if you're thinking, well, I want what's going to maximize my personal liberty, for example, there may be a situation where you have more privileges and pseudo rights bestowed on you by having like a minarchist state around than you would in an anarchical society, because then everybody would by de facto have to be equal to some extent. There wouldn't be any tyrants lording over anybody. So if you wanted solely to maximize liberty in the context of yourself, and you just wanted the ability to do as many things as possible, there's a situation where you could like justify a minarchist state that way. So if we look at this from a logical chain of discovering these things from first principles moving forward, we don't have that selection bias, right? So a great example of this would be the state of nature, right? So we come up with our initial assumptions, which are essentially the 3 rules of logic, which I just did an episode of the podcast on with Patrick Smith about. One of those, that was one of the topics on there. So if you guys want to go check that out, that'd probably be a great place to brush up if you're not aware of what those things are. And, you know, the existence of the state of nature and reality, essentially, because these things are very connected, intertwined in a sense. And from there, you can build out the rest of voluntarism. That's what the whole point of kind of season 3 is supposed to show, is that if you have these 2 things, essentially, the rest kind of naturally flowers out of it without any inherent contradictions or any unwanted arbitrariness or ideas like that. But if I was to select before all of this, even if I made those 2 things my also true, right? If I was to select before all of that I was like a utilitarian and therefore pleasure over pain in all cases, that would immediately present that selection bias and not allow for the true discovery as you went along your moral discovery through this philosophical path, right? From first principles to the end, to your ethical solutions to conflict and to problems and your answers and how to work in reality and how to deal with these sorts of things. So basically what I'm trying to get at here is, don't let yourself be limited by something you want. Because if what you want is worth wanting to begin with, you'll wind up at that point anyways. If pleasure is inherently more valuable than pain, and it always will be, and it always should be, you should be able to get there without any sort of initial assumption in that direction from first principles to the end. I do not believe that is the case, which is why these philosophies of want exist. And so that's just something to keep in mind. Even if you come into this and you say, I want to maximize liberty, and that is your first assumption, you're operating in the incorrect order. You need to go back to first principles and build up. Where this, again, it can get a little dangerous in situations where people want to actualize, say, their own flavors, right, of how they want the world to be. And you'll see some people who discuss philosophy as kind of this nebulous form that can kind of flow between different people, and that the ethics, so, you know, it's all kind of like a personal interpretation, which is what I would consider like a personal morality, for example, which would be like your opinion on smoking marijuana or something. But these are not any sort of ethically derived things, right? They're just essentially vacuous inferences made from the knowledge that we have. They have no moral weight. They have no ethical weight. None of us can compel someone to act in a manner based off of them. And that is something that is completely opposite from how traditional ethics works. So like anything that you build from first principles out should, if someone wants to be a moral agent, right, to rise above the state of nature, like we talked about earlier, should be of ethical importance to that person. It has moral weight. It has merit. It should be considered. And so if we're going to try to suggest that these things can be, well, it all kind of depends on where you want to be and where you want to go, and you can reach these things from all sorts of different places, we need to understand that those incorrect, fundamentally, methods of arriving at these different locations, at the same location even, and a lot of times, can lead to different answers in some situations that could create ethical conflicts. So this is one of the reasons why I encourage people, even though I am doing a series where I'm building voluntarism, I think it's important that we do a lot of the legwork ourselves, and that we don't just take everybody's word at face value, that we do the reading, we do the thinking, we process this information, and we build up our moral system and compare and contrast it to other people's. Have discussions, have conversations, have debates, and find the truth inside of all of that. If we can do that, we'll be in a much better place than we've probably ever been in human history, and I think it'll be very good for us. But when you're doing so, make sure you avoid the temptation of the philosophy of wants, because it can lead you astray in the process. It doesn't matter what subjective value you have on what goals. Try to leave those out when constructing any form of moral philosophy. Even if it's, I want to maximize peace in my community, I want to maximize safety for my family. These are all things that are subjective values that you are imposing onto this broader philosophy that can lead to a lot of dangerous and what are fundamentally unethical things, like saying speeding is unethical because it could raise the risk of you crashing or hitting someone, a kid playing in the streets. All these things are true, or at least could potentially be true, reasonably so with the information that we have today. But they fail Hume's law and are only acceptable to any sort of moral philosophy if you are going to first posit in an initial assumption that we must value the safety of our community above everything else, above the rules of logic, above Hume's law. And at that point, you're not doing philosophy, you're doing the state of nature with extra steps, because once you break this chain, the whole thing comes apart. That's a great way to think about it. If you want to look at building a philosophy as your end ethical goals and implementation and your first principles on the other side, every step between there is a link in the chain. And if one of those links breaks or is not made of the, like say you make a link in a chain out of balsa wood, and we're holding up tons worth of weight here, when that chain breaks, it all falls, and all you're left with is the original place where you started, which is the state of nature. That's it. So make sure you guys are keeping this in mind. Some people may disagree. Some people won't care and continue along their way. Most of those people I probably agree with in so many ways it doesn't really matter, but I want to, again, encourage you guys to try looking at these things from a different angle. No matter what your philosophical bent is, no matter what your political bent is, if you're trying to develop a moral philosophy, which all of us as rational human beings should be doing to live our lives by, we should be trying to avoid philosophies of want and trying to discover the truth that is inside of reality, kind of waiting for us to discover it in a sense. But that's all I've got for you guys. If you want, make sure you go ahead and check out the socials. Go over to the Odyssey page if you're watching this on YouTube. Shame on you. You should not be doing that. I just waved a shotgun shell at you. It happened to be sitting on my desk here. But make sure you go check out the Odyssey page. Follow over there. Great stuff. Odyssey's an amazing platform. Go check out the float for Liberty After Dark and myself. And yeah, that's all I've got for you guys. So until the next episode, make sure you take it easy.